Okay, let's talk about cartographic best practices, the things that you should really know as a GIS user to make maps which are helpful to people. This map on the right is a typical GIS map. You will notice all of the underscores that are so common in GIS. We also have data floating in space, scale bar that has weird increments like 2.25, a north arrow that's a little too detailed. I feel like this belongs on, say, a 19th century sailing map, and acronyms that don't mean a lot. Where are we? What is this map showing? What is this topic? Who is the audience? Who is the purpose? What is the purpose? What's good? What's bad on this map? So let's back up a second and first talk about layout. This is the layout of your map on a screen or a page. Here's our typical GIS map. Has a neat line and lots of white space. We push our title all the way up to the neat line. Our arrow, north arrow, is just kind of floating. But what if we used that white space to add vital information to our map? And what if we broke out of that box and got rid of the neat line? This map is from National Geographic, and it's a beautiful, easy to read map. It's not very different from that other map that I showed, but it's much more interesting. It just requires changing some of the defaults. So when you make a map in ArcGIS, often it defaults to making this map, which is why a lot of GIS maps all look pretty similar. Let's talk about scale bars. There are many scale bars in ArcGIS, and it can get confusing, and unfortunately in ArcGIS, it actually is harder to make a simple scale bar than a more complicated one. On the left is a screenshot of all these scale bars. On the right, these are excerpts from maps made by the US Geological Survey, or USGS. On the USGS, it's important that they give you all of these highly detailed scale bars. These maps are designed to be highly precise and used for measurement. But most of the time, you're making maps more like this thematic map, where you don't really need to give a detailed scale. You just need to give an indication that there is a scale, that your data is to scale, and give an idea of what that scale is. Simple is better. Keep to whole numbers. Best idea. In this map, the scale bar is just a simple line with some basic text. Line, 2 miles. How important is your scale bar for your map? Ask how important it is for your audience and purpose. This is in the New York Times, showing the battle in Mosul a few years ago in Iraq. And for most of the New York Times readers, they don't need to measure this. They just need to get an idea of what's going on in this area as readers of the news. Now, if this same map were a military map, we might need a much more detailed scale bar, right? Because we need to actually know how far things are and make some detailed measurements. so that we don't end up in an area where there is violence. How important is your scale bar? Think about your audience and purpose. It's important to know the scale, but just remember that a simple scale might do just fine depending on your audience. The same rules for scale bars go for north arrows. If it isn't important for your audience and purpose, or especially if you use the default north is up, then it's often okay to just leave it off. Finally, one of my biggest pet peeves about maps made in GIS is that often map makers are lazy. They don't have time to find data to give their thematic data context. Spend some time getting data to give your data context, or just use a base map. Don't just have your thematic information floating in space. Where is it? What towns, cities, mountain ranges, etc. is it near? This is Detroit. Detroit is not an island. There's no context information to tell you anything about this. We haven't added labels. We have no idea what's going on. Maybe this is a natural boundary, but this looks like there's probably some stuff up here and over here, right? Make sure you give that information to your map readers. It's really difficult to understand what's going on here if we can't see the larger context. Esri nicely provides base maps, which make your job of showing the geography much easier than it used to be. You can use them, but use them wisely. Things like imagery are really hard to show your thematic data on top of, while things like the canvas maps here are much better. Here I use the dark gray canvas map to give you context. Now you can see that Detroit is not an island. In fact, that natural boundary is the river with Canada on the other side, and the counties that border it on the north, south, east, and west. This wouldn't look as good on top of imagery, but this dark gray canvas does a great job. I always suggest, though, that you try to make your own base map instead of using the default ones from Esri, unless you're in a big rush. Here are some places where you can get data: naturalearthdata.com, the US Geological Survey or USGS, and even Esri.